The email came in just after lunch, one of those bright little notifications that can ruin your whole day. It sat there in my inbox, cheerful and innocent, with a subject line that read, "Annual Stevenson Family Coastal Retreat. Save the date." For a moment, I just stared at it, feeling that old twist in my stomach start to form before I even opened it. It didn't matter what the message said. It never really did. For the last 5 years, these messages meant the same thing. Vanessa sends them out like clockwork, all bright words and exclamation marks, knowing exactly who will show up and exactly who will be left out. And even though my name is technically on the list, the reality is, I haven't belonged there in years. Every summer, I see the same photographs posted online, everyone gathered at the big gray house on the Maine coast, laughing and hugging on the wide porch with the ocean behind them. And I am always somewhere else. At work, on a plane, or just in my apartment in Boston pretending that it doesn't bother me. Pretending that I don't still care. I leaned back in my office chair and let my eyes wander to the framed certificates on my wall. Senior Project Manager. 34 years old. The youngest to ever handle national rollouts for our firm. I've been running million-dollar schedules across the country, juggling deadlines that would terrify most people, and yet this simple little email still managed to make me feel 12 years old again. I could almost hear my mother's voice in the back of my head, that thin layer of disappointment she never bothered to hide. It didn't matter how good my grades were, how many awards I won, or how far I got in my career. I was always just Claire, the one who never quite measured up to Vanessa or to Michael. When I was a kid at those summer reunions, they were out sailing or talking business with Dad on the deck, while I was the one stuck in the kitchen helping with the dishes. It was subtle, but it was clear. I didn't fit their picture of what a Stevenson should be. I glanced around my office, the soft hum of computers, the muted city sounds outside the window. No one here knew that I had been holding my breath since that notification appeared. No one here knew that I still dreaded these emails, even though I told myself every year that this time it wouldn't matter. That I'm grown now. That I built a life. That I shouldn't care about a house on a windy stretch of the Maine coastline. And yet, here I was, watching my cursor hover over the message like it might bite. For a moment, I thought about deleting it, just dragging it into the trash and pretending it had never been sent. But I didn't. I opened it instead, because as much as I tell myself I've moved on, part of me is still that girl who wanted to be seen. Jason appeared over the top of my cubicle wall like he always does when he senses something is wrong, holding his coffee like a peace offering. He didn't even have to ask. He just looked at me, then at the screen, then back at me with that slow, patient expression that always makes me feel seen. "Another family thing?" he asked quietly, and I nodded before I even realized I was doing it. "Annual coastal retreat," I said, trying to make it sound casual, like it didn't matter. "Same house, same week, same everything." Jason pulled over a chair and sat down, spinning it backwards so he could lean his arms across the backrest. "You going this time?" he asked, and I could feel my throat tighten. I wanted to tell him yes, that this year would be different, but the truth is I already knew how it would play out. It always does. I opened the email just long enough to see the photos from last year attached. Sunset dinners on the deck, sailing trips, bonfires on the sand. My name might be on the guest list, but I'm never really part of it. It's been that way for as long as I can remember. I told Jason once about the summer I turned 12, how my mother had called me into the kitchen to help with food prep while my sister Vanessa, only a year older, got to sit with Dad and Michael at the table on the porch listening to business talk. "Girls don't need to worry about all that," Mom had said when I'd asked why I couldn't sit with them, and that was that. Year after year, it was the same. I was the helper, the extra pair of hands. Vanessa was the one they dressed up for family photos, the one Dad proudly introduced to his clients. Michael was the golden boy, the one everyone said had a future. And me? I read books under the table while everyone else toasted each other. Jason didn't say anything. He just reached over and tapped his knuckles lightly on my desk, the way he does when he knows I'm thinking about the past. That's the thing about him. He never tries to tell me it doesn't matter. He just lets me sit with it. My phone buzzed against the desk, and I glanced down to see a text from Haley, my oldest friend. She's been my anchor since we were kids, the one person who saw how it really was in that house. The message was short, but I didn't need more. Got the invite? It read. Same as always. No room again this year, apparently. I exhaled slowly, a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I typed back without even thinking. They've already started making excuses? Her reply came fast. Vanessa called me yesterday. Says the house is packed. Sounds like they're trying to push you out again. Jason watched me as I set the phone down, and I could see the unspoken question in his face. Let me guess, he said finally. This is the part where you pretend it doesn't matter and throw yourself into work. He wasn't wrong. That's what I always do. But as I sat there, looking at the pictures attached to that email, something in me was starting to shift. Richard's office always feels like another world. All glass walls and soft leather, the kind of place where the noise of the city can't touch you. He was already standing by the window when I knocked, a folder in one hand and a pen in the other. But the moment he saw my face, he closed the folder and waved me in. Family? He asked, not even bothering with a hello, because after all these years, he can read me better than most. I sat down across from him and gave a small, humorless laugh. Yeah, annual retreat. Same story. He nodded slowly and let the silence stretch out just long enough before changing the subject to something that actually matters. Forget them for a moment. Let's talk about the merger. Are you ready to walk the board through your proposal next week? That was his way of reminding me that there are worlds where my voice matters, where the only thing that counts is the work I've done. I opened my tablet and pulled up the projections I'd been fine-tuning for weeks. The numbers were strong. I knew that. We talked through market shares and combined resources, about timing and integration strategies. But somewhere in the middle of all that strategy, my focus drifted back to the email waiting in my inbox. Richard noticed it instantly. He always does. He set his pen down and looked at me in that steady, calm way he has. Claire, he said, I know what those people have done to you over the years. I know what it feels like to keep trying to earn respect you'll never get. But let me tell you something. The best revenge isn't a fight. It's building a life so solid that they have to see you no matter how hard they try not to. The best revenge, he said, leaning forward, is making yourself impossible to ignore. There was no heat in his voice, just a quiet certainty, and it hit me harder than I expected. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at him, hearing the words over and over. When the meeting ended, I stayed in the chair for a few extra seconds, staring at the city lights spread out behind him. I'd built a life here, far away from the beach house and the porch where I used to sit alone. I'd built a career that no one could dismiss. And still, a single email could make me feel small. As I gathered my notes and walked out, something inside me hardened. Jason was waiting outside the office with his usual grin, but I only gave him a nod before heading straight to my desk. Richard's words kept echoing in my head. Make yourself impossible to ignore. For the first time, I realized I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to take back something that had been taken from me years ago. Something that no one in that family had ever thought I deserved. I didn't have a plan yet. Not exactly. But as I sat down at my desk and opened the merger documents again, I knew that by the time summer came, I would. That night, the office lights were long since off, and the city outside my window had dissolved into a blur of headlights when my phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Haley always calls when she senses I'm spiraling. I put her on speaker and let her voice fill the quiet of my apartment. So, she began without preamble, I'm guessing you got the email. I leaned against the counter, half smiling at how predictable it all was. Annual retreat, same as always. She made a low sound in her throat. And let me guess, Vanessa already called with some excuse about space being limited? I laughed softly. She hasn't yet, but she will. She always does. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she sighed. Claire, why do you keep letting them do this to you? You're not the kid who used to hide in her room anymore. You've worked your ass off. You've built a life that none of them even understand. When are you going to show them who you've become? I walked into my living room, where the glow of my laptop screen still showed a folder full of photos Vanessa had attached to her email. There they were, all of them, on that same porch. Glasses raised, hair perfect, sunburned smiles. There was a picture of the kids running down to the beach with sparklers in hand. The adults gathered around a bonfire like some commercial for perfect family life. I wasn't in a single one. I never am. Haley's voice was still in my ear, steady but insistent. You've been proving them wrong for 10 years, Claire, but you've been doing it quietly. Maybe it's time to stop being quiet. Maybe it's time they see exactly what they chose to dismiss. I sank down onto the couch, staring at the images on the screen. What's the point? I whispered, not sure if I was talking to her or to myself. They've made it clear what I am to them. A footnote. She didn't even hesitate. The point is that you don't need them to validate you. But you deserve the satisfaction of standing in that house and knowing they can't erase you. You deserve to take up space. Something about those words, the house, the space, made me turn my attention to the real estate tab that had been open on my browser for months. I'd been watching it without admitting why, the listing for the family's coastal house. It had been on the market for a while now, the owners, my parents, unable to maintain it after the downturn. The price had dropped again. For years, that house had been a symbol of everything I wasn't allowed to have. And now it was just sitting there, waiting for someone who cared enough to claim it. My fingers hovered over the mouse as Haley kept talking, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I zoomed in on the weathered porch boards, on the white trim peeling around the windows. My chest tightened, not with sadness this time, but with something sharper, something closer to resolve. Maybe you're right, I said finally, more to myself than to her. Maybe it's time. And for the first time that night, I smiled. The days that followed became a blur of late nights and early mornings. The kind of relentless stretch of time that only big corporate deals can create. My entire life narrowed down to charts, projections, integration plans, and contingency models. It was exhausting and, in a way, exactly what I needed. If I kept my focus locked on the numbers, on every possible detail of this merger, I didn't have to think about the email, or the photos, or the way my chest still tightened when I remembered them. By the time the morning of the presentation arrived, I had rehearsed every slide so many times I could recite the numbers in my sleep. The boardroom was full, a long table lined with men and women whose faces I had learned to read over the years. And as I stood at the head of it, I felt that odd, steady calm take over. I walked them through my plan, how the merger could strengthen market presence, how each division would integrate, how the combined portfolio would position us for growth. I answered every question without flinching, even when the head of the other company leaned forward and asked if I was sure about the projections. I stake my reputation on them, I said, and I meant every word. When the meeting was over, there was a moment of silence. Then the sound of chairs scraping back as hands were extended toward me. The signatures on the preliminary agreement came faster than I expected, and I could feel Richard's eyes on me as I shook hands with each board member. We walked out of the room side by side, and for a moment he looked more like a proud parent than a boss. "You did it," he said, his voice low. "They're on board." I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For once, the thing I'd poured myself into completely had gone exactly as planned. I wanted to savor that moment, to let it wash away everything else. But the world has a way of not letting you stay still. Later that afternoon, Richard called me back into his office. Only this time, there was something in his voice that made me sit a little straighter. He told me that the merger had opened a new opportunity, a leadership role overseeing an international expansion project, split between New York and Los Angeles. The offer hit me like a wave. It was the kind of career-defining role that would put me on the map permanently, the kind of job people spend entire lifetimes chasing. And, of course, the timeline lined up perfectly with the dates of the family retreat. I sat there with the offer in my lap, staring at the words while the image of the house on the Maine coast burned in my mind. It was as if the two worlds I'd been trying to keep separate had suddenly collided, forcing me to choose between them. But as I left his office, the decision began to take shape, sharper with every step I took. For once, I wasn't going to let them dictate my choices. I was going to take both, the job and the house. The phone call with the realtor felt strangely formal for something so personal. I sat at my dining table with a notebook full of figures in front of me, listening to the agent confirm the details of the property. Every sentence making my heart beat a little faster. The house had been on the market longer than anyone expected. The price had dropped again, and there were no other serious offers. I asked about closing through a corporate entity, and when she said it was possible, I felt that quiet click of a plan sliding into place. We talked terms, inspections, renovations, my voice calm and practical, while inside me the storm of memory churned. The weathered wood, the smell of salt, the porch where I'd spent summers watching everyone else belong. It was all going to be mine now, not as a borrowed space, but as something I had claimed on my own terms. When I hung up, I stared at the unsigned paperwork on my screen for a long time, then typed my name and hit send. Just like that, the house was no longer theirs. Later that night, I told Haley first. She was sitting cross-legged on my couch with a glass of wine in hand, and when I said the words out loud, "I bought it," she actually dropped the glass into her lap. "You did what?" she asked, half laughing, half shocked. "Through my company," I explained, grinning for the first time in days. "They won't know until I'm ready for them to know." She stared at me for a long moment and then leaned forward, her face lit with something between pride and mischief. "Claire, this is genius. You're not just showing up this year, you're walking into your house." Jason found out the next morning when he stopped by my office. He blinked at me like he wasn't sure if I was joking, then broke into the widest grin I'd ever seen on him. "You know this is going to blow their minds, right?" he said. "That's the idea," I told him, and for once I felt no hesitation about it. In the days that followed, I made the arrangements in secret. I booked time off work right before the retreat dates, scheduled a quiet trip to Maine, and arranged for a cleaning crew to make sure everything was in perfect shape when I arrived. My plan was simple. I would go there before anyone else, walk through the door with my own key, and be waiting when they tried to use theirs. I imagined their faces when they realized the house they had kept me out of for so many years now belonged to me. The thought didn't fill me with revenge exactly. It was something quieter than that. Something like balance finally being restored. The paperwork arrived in my inbox a few days later, and as I held the keys in my hand for the first time, I thought of the little girl who used to press her face against the window while the others laughed without her. This time, it was going to be different. The drive up the coast felt surreal, like I was retracing steps I had taken 100 times before, but now on my own terms. The closer I got to the water, the more familiar everything became. The crooked fences, the weathered shingles on roadside diners, the smell of salt carried on the wind. But this time there was no knot of dread in my stomach. I pulled into the gravel driveway and cut the engine, sitting there for a moment in the quiet. The house looked exactly as I remembered. The pale gray siding, the wraparound porch, the big windows staring out at the Atlantic. Only now there was one difference. The keys in my bag were mine. I grabbed them and walked up the steps slowly, listening to the boards creak under my feet, then slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and the door opened with the faintest sigh, as if even the house itself understood that something had changed. Inside, the air smelled of salt and dust, And for a long time, I just stood there, letting my eyes travel over the rooms that had shaped so much of my childhood. The kitchen where I used to be sent to chop vegetables while the others laughed outside. The hallway lined with family photos that had never included me. The stairs that led to the small bedroom where I hid with my books. It was all exactly as I remembered, but it felt different now. It was quiet. Mine. I walked through slowly, touching the walls with my fingertips, reclaiming each room as if it had been waiting for me all this time. My phone rang, breaking the silence. Mom's name flashed across the screen. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but then I answered, pressing it to my ear. Her voice came bright and rehearsed, like always. "Claire, darling, about the reunion." I cut her off before she could start. "You don't need to worry about accommodations this year," I said calmly. "I've got it covered." There was a pause on the other end, the kind that makes you almost hear the wheels turning. "What do you mean?" she asked. I walked into the living room and sat on the arm of the couch, staring out at the ocean through the big front windows. "I'm at the house right now," I said. Silence. "I bought it, Mom. It's mine now." For a moment, nothing, just the faint sound of her breathing. Then, "You what?" she whispered. "How?" I let a small smile pull at my mouth. "I'll explain when you get here," I said and hung up before she could answer. The phone was still warm in my hand as I looked around the room again. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a guest here, and I wasn't an outsider. I sat there and let the feeling sink in. The realization that I finally owned the one place that had always made me feel like I didn't belong. It was mine now, and so was the peace that came with it. I had been sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the ocean breeze coming in through the screen door, when the sound of car doors slamming outside cut through the calm. They weren't supposed to arrive until tomorrow. For a moment, I just sat there, listening to the familiar voices drifting up the porch steps, the sound of bags hitting the wood planks, the laughter that had always been just out of reach. Then there was the rattle of keys at the front door, the metallic scrape of a lock that wouldn't turn. "That's weird," Vanessa's voice said, followed by my mother's impatient tone telling her to try again. I closed the laptop slowly, stood, and walked toward the door. The look on their faces when I opened it will be burned into my memory forever. Shock, confusion, and something else. Like the moment they realized the script had changed and they didn't know their lines anymore. "Looking for something?" I asked lightly, leaning against the frame. My mother blinked, clutching her handbag like a shield. "Claire, what are you doing here? How did you get inside?" I smiled and stepped aside. "I live here. Come in." The words seemed to hang in the air as they exchanged glances and then followed me inside, dragging their suitcases behind them. We ended up in the kitchen, where they sat around the table like guests while I stood, hands braced on the back of a chair. "You can stop trying your keys," I said evenly. "They don't work anymore. The house is mine now. I bought it." There was a chorus of protests, all overlapping. How, when, why. And I waited for it to die down before continuing. "You never asked what I was doing with my life. You never cared. You assumed I'd never amount to anything, and while you were busy overlooking me, I was building something. I've been running projects bigger than this house, earning more than you ever imagined. And when this place came up for sale, I decided it was time to take back what was mine." I opened a folder that had been sitting on the counter and laid out the photos. The crumbling porch, the rotting deck boards, the leaking roof, the wiring so frayed it was a fire waiting to happen. "This is what it looked like when I bought it," I said. "It was weeks away from foreclosure. None of you even noticed. You didn't ask, you didn't help. You just assumed someone else would fix it." I slid the renovation receipts across the table, the legal documents with my name printed cleanly across the top. I did. I fixed it. For a long time, no one spoke. My brother stared at the photos, pale. Vanessa looked down at the papers like they might burn her. And my mother just sat there, fingers knotted together, eyes glassy. finally seeing me not as the girl she could ignore, but as a woman who had taken control. For the first time in years, the silence in that kitchen belonged to me. The kitchen felt heavier with every second that passed, the air thick with everything we'd never said. My brother was the first to break the silence, his voice sharper than he probably meant it to be. "So this is it? You buy the house and suddenly you think you're better than all of us?" I laughed once, a short, bitter sound. "Better? No. I just stopped waiting for your approval." Vanessa crossed her arms and leaned back, her tone turning cold. "You could have told us you were doing well. You could have asked for help instead of blindsiding us." That struck a nerve, and I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. When exactly was I supposed to do that? Between being sent to the kitchen every summer or the years you all spent pretending I didn't exist? Tell me, Vanessa, which reunion would have been the right one to interrupt to announce I had a career worth talking about? Mom flinched at that, her lips pressing together. "It wasn't like that," she said softly, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Do you know what it feels like?" I continued. "To watch every milestone in your life ignored? To get a graduate degree with honors and realize the only reason no one was there to see it was because Michael had a soccer game the same weekend? To call home with news of a promotion and hear the silence while you talk about your own daughter's kids instead?" My phone buzzed on the table then, a single sharp vibration that cut through the room. I glanced down out of habit, and for a moment I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was an email from Richard. "Board approval confirmed. International division lead is yours. Congratulations." For a moment, the room blurred around me. This was the news I had been waiting for. The role that would change everything. New York, Los Angeles, an entire expansion under my leadership. I set the phone down slowly, the tiniest smile touching the corner of my mouth. "What's that?" my mother asked, her voice tentative. I looked at each of them, one by one, letting the moment sink in before I answered. "It's confirmation," I said quietly. "I've just been named head of the international project. I'll be running operations between New York and Los Angeles. This is the kind of position people spend their lives chasing." The silence that followed was different now, tinged with something closer to awe. My brother's shoulders sagged a little, and Vanessa looked away, staring out at the water as if it had answers. Mom reached across the table but stopped short, her hand hovering. "I didn't realize," she whispered. "We didn't know." I sat back, feeling the weight of years shifting. "No," I said. "You didn't want to know. And now it doesn't matter. I built all of it without you." For the first time in my life, I saw it click in their eyes. I wasn't the girl they left behind anymore. I had become someone they couldn't ignore. 2 weeks later, instead of the usual drive up the coast, my family found themselves checking into a 5-star hotel in Midtown Manhattan, their names already waiting at the front desk under my reservation. I had decided that if we were going to have a reunion, it was going to be on my terms, far from the porch and the memories that kept us trapped in old patterns. The hotel lobby glowed with marble and brass. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and I stood near the elevators, watching their expressions as they realized what I had arranged. Vanessa looked uncomfortable in the kind of dress code she'd never bothered with before. Michael tugged at his tie like it was choking him, and my parents moved slowly, unsure of where to look. "Claire," my mother finally said when they reached me, "this is a lot." I smiled calmly. I thought it was time we did things differently. Dinner was held in a private room overlooking the skyline, glass walls reflecting the city lights like a sea of stars. I watched them try to adjust, their voices quieter than I remembered, the usual casual dismissals nowhere to be found. As the courses came, perfectly plated dishes that made even Michael pause, I talked about the project I was leading, about the travel between New York and Los Angeles, about what my days look like now. I didn't do it to brag. I did it because for the first time I wanted them to understand that my life was real, solid, and entirely mine. After the plates were cleared, my father gestured toward the balcony, asking quietly if we could talk. I followed him outside where the noise of the city softened under the evening air. He stood with his hands on the railing, staring out. "I didn't know how far you'd come," he said finally. "I didn't want to believe I'd been so blind to it. You were always so quiet." I folded my arms. "I was quiet because no one listened. You only saw me when I was useful." He nodded slowly, his shoulders heavier than I'd ever seen them. "That's on me," he said. Later, my mother joined me at one of the smaller tables inside, her voice unsteady as she began. "I know I can't undo everything," she said. "I know I made you feel small. But sitting here, watching you like this, I realize how wrong we were." I looked at her for a long time before answering. "I spent years trying to earn a place at your table. I'm done doing that. I'm not going to sit quietly in the corner anymore, and I'm not going to let you pretend I don't exist." She reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away, but I didn't soften either. "If you want to be part of my life," I said, "it will be on equal terms. No more second place, no more background. I've worked too hard to ever be invisible again." For once, she didn't argue. She just nodded, and I saw in her eyes that maybe, finally, she believed me. The morning before I was due to leave for New York, I walked slowly through the house on the Maine coast one last time. It was quiet now, the kind of soft quiet you only get when the tide is out and the breeze moves gently through the open windows. I paused in each room, letting the memories come and then letting them go just as quickly. This place had been a shadow over me for so long, but now, as I traced my fingers over the smooth new banister and the fresh paint on the walls, it felt different. It wasn't a wound anymore. It was something I had claimed, something I had turned into my own. I was halfway through packing the last box in my room when I heard the knock. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, but then the door opened and my mother stepped inside, holding a small wooden box I didn't recognize. Behind her came Vanessa and Michael, awkward, uncertain, as if they weren't sure they were welcome. Mom placed the box on the bed and stepped back. "We found this in the attic," she said quietly. I lifted the lid and saw a jumble of my life that I hadn't realized anyone had kept. Old honor roll certificates, faded photos from science fairs, the program from my graduation that no one had attended. "You kept these?" I asked, my voice catching just a little. "Every single one," she said. "I just never told you. I thought if I showed you, it would seem like I was encouraging you to be someone I didn't understand." I realize now how wrong that was. Vanessa stepped forward then, holding out a letter she had clearly rewritten a dozen times. "I don't know how to undo the way we've treated you," she said, "but I want to try. I want to get to know you, not the version of you we decided you were years ago, but who you actually are now." Michael nodded, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Same here," he said. "I know I've been an idiot, but I want to fix that, if you'll let me." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the box still open beside me, looking at their faces. For the first time, I saw not the people who had made me feel small, but a family trying, however clumsily, to reach for something different. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said finally. "New York is going to take up most of my time, and I'm not promising that years of damage can be undone overnight." My mother nodded quickly, tears in her eyes. "We're not asking for overnight," she said. "We're asking for a chance." I closed the lid on the box, holding it against my chest for a moment. "Then here's how it's going to be," I said. "This house, my life, my work. I set the terms now. If you want to be part of it, it's on my rules. Equal, no more pretending I don't belong." Vanessa reached out, and after a long pause, I took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. The morning I left for New York, the sky over the coast was washed in pale gold, the kind of light that makes the ocean look endless. My suitcase was already packed and waiting by the door, but I took one last slow walk through the house, pausing at the wide windows where I could see the tide pulling back from the shore. It felt like a different place than the one I had first unlocked weeks ago. Back then, it had been heavy with old ghosts, rooms thick with the memory of a girl who always felt invisible. Now, it was something else. The repairs had brought it back to life. But more than that, so had I. Every piece of it carried my mark. The choices I made, the control I took back. I stood in the doorway of my old room, now clean and bright, and thought about how far I had come to stand here. Outside, my car was already waiting, engine humming softly as if it knew there was no going back. Mom, Vanessa, and Michael stood by the porch steps, not blocking me, not clinging to me, just there. They had said what they needed to say the night before, and now there was a strange, quiet understanding between us. I hugged them each in turn, quickly, then stepped back, feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, and the relief of knowing I didn't need to carry it anymore. Haley had driven up to see me off, leaning against her own car with a grin. "Ready?" she asked, and I nodded, taking one last long look at the house behind me. "It feels different," I said softly, "like it's finally mine." She glanced at the weathered shingles and the tall grass swaying in the breeze. "It always should have been," she said. As the car pulled away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, the gray porch and white trim fading into the horizon until it was just a shape against the water. But it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like leaving something safe behind while carrying the strength it had given me. Ahead was New York, a new position that would stretch me in every way, a future I had built for myself without anyone's permission. I thought about the little girl I used to be, sitting on that porch with a book in her lap, convinced she would never belong anywhere. She had no idea that one day she would take that same porch, that same house, and turn it into proof that she had never needed anyone's permission to belong. The ocean followed us down the road for a while, glittering in the morning sun, and as the highway opened ahead, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. Whatever came next, I was ready.